Hello, and welcome once again to another episode of Inside the World of MACK'S HEADROOM. I've started out videos before by saying I'm nervous, but in this case, I really am nervous. This one's weird. And, it's kind of funny because it's not that I'm nervous about talking about the content, which is a fair amount of self-disclosure on my part. But that doesn't really make me uptight. What makes me uptight is that there's all these YouTube shows that are sort of covering the same subject. And I have some big differences of opinion with this subject, but I don't want to challenge somebody's, reality or get bad press. But, in the service of real, true harm reduction, I'd like to tell you my story a little bit because it may help some people take a look at the subject we're going to talk about, which I framed as, opiate tapering. But obviously it has to do with my opiate tapering many years ago, like in the about the middle 70s. But I have been very ambivalent about doing it because it seems to me like a lot of people on YouTube, first of all, have framed opiate withdrawal as this hideous, awful experience. And I'm not sure that's the case. And second of all, I think that, I hate to say this, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I think some of these other YouTube things, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's one guy I just can't stand. Where they wear their addiction like a red badge of courage. And I have no intentions of doing that. I'm old enough where I don't really give a shit if somebody's going to judge me at this point. Probably everybody knew about my history anyway, it was my age. But it's not like I'm uptight about talking about that. Because I think I have some things to offer that may dispel some of the mythology that's in these, I withdrew from opiates and it was hideous. There's a bajillion of them. Interestingly, they're mostly younger people that are doing that, no offense. But being an old fart like myself, I thought maybe I could offer my experience and my perception of what it was like to taper off of a large dose of methadone following a about 4-year love affair with heroin, intravenous, from the beginning. Never snorted it, smoked it, nothing. Just shot it up in 1976, April. 1972 of April. And you know what I mean. And the reason I want to tell my story is, like I say, I think my experience of opiate tapering was far different. And that's not because, there's fentanyl now, or, because now there's pharmaceutical this or that, or, no. Listen, I went into doing heroin to do heroin, okay? Let's be very frank about it. And as I do so many things, I plunged into it big time. So I was not like a lightweight or a chipper or anything like that. I'll just tell you how I got started. I was a freshman in 1972 in the spring semester at the University of Arizona, which ironically is only 60 miles from the border from Mexico. And to make a long story short, it really was a good school. I loved my experience there, but it was like drug heaven. And interestingly, again, because it was so close to the border, much like in the 80s when people were doing coke, well, in the 70s, I started college in 71, so in the 70s, interestingly, in Tucson, Arizona, of all places, people were shooting heroin that were professors and this and that, and that's how I got into it. And, I had the classic heroin addiction journey. At 66, I still have hepatitis C. However, I'm very, very lucky because I have hepatitis C3, which is like it doesn't really hurt your liver. It was the first variation of that. But I didn't come out unscathed. I did do the kinds of things that you hear about. Although, I have a certain moral structure. So, like, I never did armed robberies and burglaries and shit like that. But I did do some pretty shitty things. I stole some things from my parents. I sold almost everything I had at one point. What other? Oh, I even sold my dad's gold watch that my mother had given to him. Excuse me. I mean, I see I'm a little nervous. I owed dealers money. I had guns pointed at me because I owed money. Wrote bad checks. So, I've been through it. And I know what it's like. And I don't mean to sound arrogant, but, you got to understand that being a heroin addict in Arizona at that time, we had like the purest stuff in the world. Nobody needed fentanyl or any bullshit like that. I mean, it was like really strong stuff, so you could get really good and addicted to it too. Let's see. With that in mind, I hope that wasn't told as a red badge of courage. It's nothing I'm proud of, but it's nothing I really regret either. I think all experiences in life, have good and bad to them. But with that in mind, I wanted to try to talk a little bit about a couple of myths that I see on a lot of these tapes that I just want to just tell you from my experience, okay? Okay, so in, it must have been about 76, something like that. I don't know, I decided to get myself clean, I couldn't do it. And I started taking more from my parents, and they confronted me. We had our own intervention. There was no intervention, but my parents rallied together and kind of said to me, "Let me see your arms." It was that routine, And so, anyway, they sent me, ironically, to a psychoanalyst. I mean, it was innocent. Nobody knew much about drug treatment. Methadone had just come out, but I went to a psychoanalyst. Of course, what did I do? I told my parents he wanted cash as payment, and I took the cash and went and bought dope. And the analyst was a bit unconventional, and so he said to me, this isn't going to work. You're telling me I just called your parents. And I told them they owe me money, and they said they're giving it to you. And I said, look, I don't know what to do. I'm at my wit's end, and I really want to try methadone. My father is totally against it. Keep in mind, I was only about 20 years old, maybe. I said, my dad is radically against it. And the psychoanalyst did something that was very, out of character for a psychoanalyst. He gave me the money to get on methadone for the first 2 weeks, and then he said to me, "But here's the deal: you got to tell your parents that I gave you the money, and we'll have to deal with it from there." It was a miraculous thing he did. And all I can say is that my experience on methadone was really very healing and very curative. And I was on methadone at 100 milligrams, which I understand even by today's standards is a pretty good dose, for about 2 years. And what happened was, at one point, I was on 100 milligrams for, I guess it was maybe a year and 3/4, something like that. And I said, my life is starting to change. I got a job at that time. See, that's the thing about using methadone right, is during the time that you're on it, if you can get your life together a little bit more, it's a lot easier to say goodbye to. And so I got this job, and I said, maybe I'll start detoxing. So I talked to the wonderful Dr. Mark Schinderman, MD, who is probably one of the pioneers of harm reduction. And I said, "Mark, I want to detox." And he said, "Okay, but I got to tell you something. You got to do it slow, and you got to promise that you're going to obey me, because if you don't, you're going to end up back here, and you're going to feel shitty about yourself, and you're going to have what I later learned was called AVE, abstinence violation effect, which means when you relapse on something, you feel worse, and then you want to do it more again." And he said, "You didn't put it like that, but he said, you're just going to end up feeling like shit, and you're going to come back." He said, "But I know that even though you're on 100 milligrams, if you just come down real slow, and I'm going to check in with you every week, I think it'll be painless." And now I had a big heroin habit going into methadone, and then I went up to 100 milligrams very quickly, and was on that for like, close to 2 years. That's a pretty hefty dose, right? And he said, I don't think you'll have trouble. And, oh, hi, Meatball. And lo and behold, guess how long I detoxed for? 1 year and 3/4. So think about it. The 2 years that I was on it and the 1 year and 3/4 that I was at 100 milligrams, I took just as long to get off of it. And I have to tell you something. I didn't have one withdrawal effect whatsoever. I will admit I was smoking cannabis that whole time. Maybe that helped. All you AAers who believe in total abstinence, good for you. But, maybe that helped. But I had absolutely no difficulty. And, no difficulty. None. And there's a reason, and there's a great TED Talk by some guy too. I can't remember who it is, but at the very end he spells out this formula. You have to realize something about detoxing from anything, and that is that if you're at 100 milligrams and you go down, let's say 5 milligrams, so you go to 95. Well, you've only lost a small percentage. I think it's 5% of your total dose, and then maybe not even. Maybe it's 0.5. I don't know. But it's a very small percentage. But as you get further and further down, you can't take the same decrease as you did previously because you're reducing the total mass of opiate or methadone or whatever by a more exponential percentage. Each time, if you stay, like let's say if you start at 5, well, you can't continue to go down 5 milligrams until you're off of 100. It won't work. You have to start cutting down. Well, I did it 1 milligram a week and then paused, and then 1 milligram a week again, and then paused. And then it was 1 milligram a month, I think. I mean, I can't even remember, but all I know is it was very, very slow. But here's the catch. And boy, I really hope that I don't insult anybody because I know there's just so much talk about people who have gotten into heroin and gotten addicted to prescription opiates like Oxycontin and stuff like that. But I got to tell you, I think what made the real big difference for me was when I got down to about like 30 milligrams or more like about 50 milligrams, I was no longer receiving a buzz from methadone. I'm not saying I ever received an incapacitating buzz or a big nod or anything like that from methadone, but you buzz for a while. And when you get to around 50, you start to like not feel it anymore. And you think, well, I don't really need it anymore, so I'm just going to detox the fuck off of it real fast. And that is the biggest mistake. But notice what I said. I said, I was ready. I had a job. I was on good terms with my parents. I had moved out of the house. I had some new friends. And so it was time. And I recognized it. And I also realized that as I had begun to detox from 100 and I got down to 50, I realized I don't get any feeling from it anymore. But here's the big illusion. You may not get a feeling, but your body still has a tolerance, not a tolerance, but like an addiction to it. So, of course, if you just because you don't feel it anymore doesn't mean that you can just stop taking it. I mean, that's ridiculous. Because, like I said, every step from, like, as it gets smaller and smaller, every step gets exponentially larger and larger, you see? So, I found that it was a very, very painless process, really. And so that's that. And that leads me to the subject of Suboxone, or Subutex, as it's sometimes called. Now, they didn't have that in my day. But I got to tell you something about Suboxone. And, if any of you feel bad about it, like that somehow you can't make it through that withdrawal period to take it, I'm going to try to help you not feel bad about that. Because I think that Subutex or Suboxone is a really, for a drug, I got to go back. I'm sorry. One of the questions when you ask yourself if you're ready if you're actually ready to do this, is you have to ask yourself, am I really ready to not feel that buzz? And, you know, as in pain as you may be, if you're like on prescription meds, or, you know, as addicted as you may feel to junk, you have to ask yourself, am I really ready to let go of that buzz? Even if you're a medical addict, come on. When you take, you know, a bunch of Norcos for pain, it doesn't eliminate the pain. It just dopes you up. That's fine if you're in chronic pain. I'm the last one to cast judgment on people taking prescription drugs or, you know, painkillers for legitimate reasons. But what I think one of the byproducts is that you like the buzz, and that's why people start taking more as an adjunct to also the rationale that they're needing more. I think they do need more, but also they're liking the buzz, and so they're pushing it a little bit. I think that's a lot of chronic opiate users' experiences. But as far as, I'm sorry about the digression, but as far as Suboxone goes, you know, in my opinion, it is for a drug addict who likes to get high and doesn't even if it's histrionic, that you're anticipating some kind of horrible reaction, you know, to the withdrawals from whatever it is. You know, with Suboxone, you've got to be off opiates for 3 days. Because otherwise, because they put, I know in Subutex they put naltrexone in there, so you can't shoot up, you know. So you can't take a drug that has naltrexone in it if you're still addicted to opiates, which are going to terrible withdrawals. So, you know, but think about the stupidity of Suboxone. In my opinion, it's no worse than methadone. I mean, don't let people tell you that. When I had a tattoo shop, I caught some guys shooting up in the bathroom Suboxone. You know, people get high from it. It's no different than methadone in so many ways. I don't believe, and I'm living proof. Okay, so the idiocy of Suboxone, where, you know, if you think about a drug addicted mentality, and I don't mean that negatively, it's a desperate sort of predicament you're always in. And to say you have to be off of what you're so dependent on for 3 days before you can get something to make it so you don't have withdrawals, that to me is the craziest idea in the world, because any person who likes the buzz, first of all, and second of all, doesn't like the sickness, and it's going to hit them hard if they go for 3 days and they have a decent habit, that's insanity. Nobody's going to pick that option. The other thing about Suboxone I want to tell you is the reason it's so popular is because, you see, regular doctors can just get a license to prescribe it very simply by going to like a week-long course on how to use it. And then the state, depending on what state you're on, they have a limit as to how many patients you can actually take as Suboxone patients. It used to be 100. I think now it's 300 in Illinois. I'm not sure. But here's the catch. You see, to get methadone, you got to go to a methadone clinic. Doctors can't prescribe methadone. So there's this sort of like commercial thrust, I think, toward pushing people towards Suboxone because ordinary doctors can give it if they take this stupid course. But do you want to put yourself through that stupid ritual of having to withdraw yourself cold turkey for 3 days before you can take something that's going to help you not want it anymore? That to me is insanity. So, you know, sorry, but I don't think it's not any more or less addicting than methadone is. So I say to Suboxone, you know. Oh geez, I was going to play with my machine here, but I couldn't do it fast enough. Anyway, I say to Suboxone. I just think it's a politically correct response to all of the hysteria about methadone. And it's a commercial outlet for regular doctors who just want to take a course and get an extra 100 patients in their practice. Sorry, I seem a little cynical, but that's the way it is, in my humble opinion. Another thing that I saw on a show, just to wind up, is if you are on, let's say you're a medical patient that's on opiates and are strongly addicted to them, and perhaps like the little buzz effect, I think most people kind of do. It's hard not to like, actually. Maybe not, though, in some cases. You know, and let's say if you're going to a pain clinic, I watched this really great TED Talk. I just wish I could remember the name of it. But he made a very good point. He said, pain clinics are made to treat pain. They're not made to manage tapering. So, if you're going to a pain clinic, they're not going to be that great at tapering you. And they don't even know some of the tapering protocols, actually. Because a lot of times when you start mentioning tapering, they start dropping you really fast and you get real sick. Well, that makes sense. But I am living proof that at 100 milligrams for 2 years, if it took a year and 3/4 to get off of it and I didn't feel bad about it, but I realized that I couldn't get a buzz off of it either. I just had to be patient so I didn't get sick and not get into that dope fiend mentality. Like I want it, I'm not getting high from it, so what the hell? Fuck it, and I got to pay money for it on top of it all. I'm not getting high. And another plug I want to make for methadone is that when you're on 65 milligrams or more of methadone, now you're saying, oh boy, we're going to go high up in the doses, right? State clinics used to give 30. Once you get above 65 milligrams, there's what's called the blockade effect. And that just means that it's like really hard to get high on heroin. It's really hard. I tried. It's very hard. Yes, some people push it to the limit and kill themselves, but what can you say? There's that element in the junkie world, I guess. But anyway, I just hope that I'm dispelling some of these myths. I'm not trying to be like Superman because I don't think I have a Superman story to tell. What I have is a super doctor story to tell. Good old Mark Schinderman, I love you. Center for Addictive Problems, Chicago, Illinois, 609 North Wells, and this is no commercial. Maybe I'll send them a copy of it, though. I used to work there. After I was about 5 years off of methadone and was only smoking cannabis, not drinking or anything, I was dissatisfied with the job, and I became a consultant for Mark's program. And I worked there for 10 years. I wrote a couple of articles on family therapy and drug addiction. It was an interesting experience. But I hope you got something out of this. Opiate tapering does not have to be misery. You just have to go slow. And you need some supervision in doing it. And you just can't let it go when you stop getting that buzzed feeling and just thinking you're going to go it on your own, because you won't. And the idea of using Suboxone, in my opinion, is ludicrous, because you have to put yourself into a cold turkey situation for 3 days. And nobody, whether you're a legitimate prescription addict or a prescription addict who is also liking the buzz, or an outright heroin addict on methadone, I don't care. The slower the better. And I hope this is informative. It's really a harm reduction effort. I really want to kind of dispel the myth that if you do it if you do it the right way, I think you're going to be okay. And I hope that got through. And I hope I didn't come across like some kind of wearing this like some kind of red badge of courage, because it's nothing to be proud of. It is an experience in life. I don't look back on it as bad. I had some interesting experiences, and I don't call them growth experiences, but probably developed in ways hanging out with some gangbangers in Fresno, California. But nonetheless, the slower the better. And for all of you out there, I wish you very, very well in your journey in tapering and off of opiate drugs. And this has been another episode of Inside the World of MACK'S HEADROOM. Good luck.